How many of you know this one? Blast from the past. You got to been around a while to know this one. It is a good one. Back in my youth days, this was a pretty popular one for us. Okay, let's see. I got it on. Kurt Kaiser wrote it in 1969. He was a very well-known composer, but an arranger and piano player. But the only two songs that were popular was "Pass It On" and "Oh How He Loves You and Me." Those are the two that are in the hymn book. And he was born in 1934 and he died in 2018. But he worked for Word Music, and he did a lot of arrangements of hymns and arrangements of songs that choirs have done, and certainly a lot of piano arranging during this time. So that is him, and it's based on this particular passage of Scripture that we all know in Matthew 28, 19 and 20. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, of the Son, of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey everything I have commanded them. Now, y'all remember when Jesus gave us that direction and told us that that's what we are to do. So, but the first verse, I went the wrong way. The first verse, okay, come on. It only takes a spark to get a fire going, and soon all those around will warm up to its glowing. That's how it is with God's love. Once you experienced it, you spread the love to everyone you want to pass it on. Okay, so it only takes a spark. Can do a lot of... Really? Do you think that might be planned? It was his birthday, and you blew out the candle. Okay, now we'll talk about that in just a second. But let's think about the concept of it only takes a spark. How do you start a fire? How do y'all build a fire? If you're going to burn leaves, or you're going to do a bonfire, or you're going to do one in your fireplace, how do you start a fire?
Turn the gas on.
You start out, he said turn the gas on.
Hit that button, sparks it.
That's at my house, you hit the button, and what'd you say, Matt? Pour the gasoline. How fast? That's a good question. That's a good question. So, and Matt has sent, that's what's wrong with him? Huh.
You use gasoline or you use charcoal lighter?
Okay, now we've got some things, and that's a good concept, but we start with a spark, right? We got to have something to start it, all right, in order to get the fire going. Now, when we think about that, and we're thinking about this concept of passing the love of God to someone else, what does that spark have to do with that? How can you relay that spark with our sharing our testimony? Seems like we've got a lot of things happening around here, but we'll just keep letting them go. So, all right? Okay? So let's relate that spark. Let's relate that spark to our sharing our testimony. We got to start somewhere, okay? And that's what I'm trying to get to, is we've got to start somewhere when it comes to sharing our faith, okay? If we sit in our houses and we sit in our churches and we sit at our work and we never start a fire, we never start the spark, the fire's never going to get lit, is it? The fire that you feel inside of you, the energy that you have and the excitement you have about living a Christian life, We can't share it if we just sit there and hold on to it and we don't pass that on, correct? So we got the spark. Now, Matt brought up the gas or the diesel or the charcoal or whatever it is, fire starters you're going to use, but it's got to have something to fuel it, doesn't it? Okay, if you go and you take a match and you put it underneath a tree limb, it ain't going to do anything. It's just going to sit there, or it may start for a little bit and then in a few seconds it's gone. So you've got to have something that's going to fuel it and is going to make it bigger and is going to make it brighter and is going to make it last longer. What are some of those things that we can use to fuel our testimony when we start that spark? God's Word. Okay. What else? Your life story, your witness, your testimony. Prayer. The experience. Okay. Encouragement. Yeah, all of those things fuel. And I hope that all of you know how to share your faith with somebody else. And at various times we have classes that teach you how to do that. Sometimes I think that we make it too difficult. We put too much information into it instead of trying to stay with the things that matter the most. And when we do, we oftentimes, like Jeff did, we put the fire out, don't we? Instead of fueling it. All right, now, if you go and you light a fire if I started to say the pasture, okay, wow, okay. Okay, if you go to my yard and you decided you were going to light the grass and you was going to burn the grass, and sometimes they do that, and even the scripture talks about letting the ground rest for 7 years in the Old Testament, but sometimes they'll go in there and they'll burn the whole field, and what does it do? It regenerates, okay? So if you went to my yard and you lit a match and you tried I don't think there's enough fuel in a gas anywhere, because my yard is a swamp. It's going to go out the minute you put it in there. But somebody else's, and then what happens? It's going to spread, isn't it? Okay? So if I tell you my personal story, what Christ has done for me, I love to hear when somebody talks about how it changed their life and how it's a relationship, not a religion, okay? And that how their life was changed because of Christ. So when we do that and that excitement builds, then somebody else says, Brother Waylon told me about how God changed his life. And then he told Linda, and Linda came and told me, and now we are spreading the gospel out just the same way that a fire would be spread out, okay? Now, it's dark, and you build a bonfire, and what does it produce? It's going to produce light, isn't it? All right? And who is the light of the world? Okay? All right? So when we start that spark, we fuel it, we spread it around, now we have light, and we have shed light into a very dark world, haven't we? The more that we share who Christ is and the love He has for us. What else does that fireplace do? Huh? Glow, okay. Warmth. Does not, when we come to Christ, do we not have a warmth inside of us? It's a tremendous feeling in knowing that you are a child of God. And being able to express that, and you could just sit there like you do your fireplace all day long and talk about it, okay? Let's go watch this video. Go, like you're going to get up and go somewhere. Let's watch this video, and there's a man on here you might know that tells us some good things about witnessing. And if you haven't, you can tonight. Come see me. Come see Brother Mike. We will certainly talk to you and lead you in how to do that. Now, what are some ways that we can put out that fire? The way we live. If the world sees us Christians acting in a way that's ungodly, we throwing water on the fire, aren't we? Yeah. What else? Being complacent. Yeah. Your temper. Yeah. Not believing. Okay. Now, you're saying, now wait a minute, if you're a Christian, you believe. But have you ever met that Christian that they really are just okay with that fire insurance policy, but they really don't believe him for anything in their life today, tomorrow, or anything that's going on? It's like, well, that's not what he's there for. But, oh, yes, it is. Yeah. So we can quench the spirit. We can throw water on a spark that somebody else has started. But the Bible tells us that we're supposed to plant the seed and we're supposed to leave the watering up to Him. The harvesting is up to Him. Okay? So I don't have to know that every person I've ever witnessed to came to Christ or not. It blesses my heart and soul to know that they did. But my direction is obedience. Is just doing it and let Him water and harvest. You talk to somebody today about Christ, and it may be 5 years from now before God's ready to harvest that. And before they're ready to accept it. He's been watering it, and then all of a sudden, it's going to click, and they're going to go, oh, I need to give my heart and life to Christ. So that's the first verse. Now let's look at the second one. What a wondrous time is spring. Are we here now? Finally. When all the trees are budding. My eyes begin to itch. No, the birds begin to sing. The flowers start their blooming. That's how it is with God's love once you experience. You want to sing. It's fresh like spring. You want to pass it on. What are the good things about spring? The beauty. New life. Yeah. What about the flowers? The aroma, the scent. Yeah. And then, those of y'all that don't already have enough jobs, that you have another job by planting a garden, that's a full-time job. I don't know, I tried that one time and said, no, can't do it no more. I planted a whole row of carrots, y'all. I never knew that they multiplied by the thousands. There's probably still carrots in Ronnie's, the blue house. I didn't know. Anyway, that's the whole story. But it was a full-time job, and I already had two. I didn't need a third one, so I never did that again. But I accept all of the things that y'all grow and bring me. And several of y'all do that all the time, and I appreciate it. But those flowers that are budding and the trees and all doesn't happen by accident, does it? There is a God that's working it, but those things that you're planting, those things that you are wanting to reap a harvest of, takes work, doesn't it? You don't just throw it out there and say, okay, come up if you want to. It takes work. That's the way it ought to be when it comes to our relationship with Christ. We should see it as, we got a job to do. And what is the pay? What is the pay? You answer that question. What is the pay when you share your testimony, when you do your job as a Christian? Okay, what do you get out of it? More people come to Christ. Peace. Yeah. When I managed Bernie's Furniture for 17 years, we had an up system. And we did it for a couple of times that if you sold something, you went right, as soon as you were finished, you went right back to the top of the list because you were on fire. And as long as you were selling, and a lot of commission-based things will do that, And we did it on Saturdays every now and then until, we started getting mad because somebody else kept getting all the good ones and we weren't getting. But we tried that from time to time. But think about that. When you are sharing your testimony and people's lives are changed, you see them changing, it just encourages you to do it again and do it again and do it again. I promise you that the conversation does not have to be fancy. The conversation just needs to be had. Let God put the words in your mouth that He wants you to say. Yes, try to get an idea, because if you can't tell how God changed your life to yourself, you're not going to be able to tell it to somebody else. Statistics will say it needs to be about 3 minutes. I'm not one of those, but you can tell when you've lost somebody's interest. And when you have become either a browbeater or you are you've bored them, you're not getting their attention, So, and God's timing is perfect. So, you don't necessarily have to stay there until they get their life right. It doesn't have to happen that way. All right, now the last verse. I wish for you, my friend, this happiness that I found. Why is that important? How does the Bible say that we will know that we are Christians? By the fruit you bear and your love for one another, okay? So there is a question mark to ask yourself. Do you really care about lost people? Do you really have love and compassion for mankind, His greatest creation? Do you really care if they die and go to hell, or they go to, they experience what you have? My father, bless his heart, passed away several years ago, and he was an alcoholic, womanizer, got radically changed at the very first message my brother ever preached. On his way home, he came to hear him preach, and on his way home, he pulled over on the side of the road and gave his heart and life to Christ. Radical, changed completely. Never touched another drink, never smoked another cigarette, never did. Just totally different. Many years later, his church asked him to be a deacon. So he came to me and David and said, do you think that, I meet the qualifications? His salvation certainly was on the opposite side of his sin. And so, we told him some things about scriptures, and we told him, to pray about it. And then his church, he talked to his pastor, and he talked to his church, told his church about his past, and they did vote him to be a deacon. And he was one in Dorleen, and then when he came, they relocated here. He was one at Fair Park. But while he was at First Baptist Church in Dorleen, there was this one guy there that he and my father did not jihad, and that other guy was a deacon too. And I don't know what the tension was, but he walked into into the hallway one Sunday, and my father spoke to him, and the guy didn't answer back. And my dad said, and called him by his name, and said, I said hello, and the guy didn't say anything. And he said, you're not even going to speak to me? And then, and the guy never answered. The pastor was standing there. And my father hollers out, well, then you just go to, and he said the word. And then he called me and said, did I do, me and David both, we were all three on the phone. He said, was I wrong? Yes, Dad, you were wrong. You should not have done that, And then when he was volunteering at St. Francis Hospital, and he went into a guy that was going to have surgery, and he gave him the plan of salvation. The guy said, I don't want nothing to do with your God. And my dad did it again. Well, then you go to, and I'm going, Dad, that's not how you do it, And so he had to rely on his children to teach him, how to live a Christian life and the things that was right or wrong. And then there, about the last 10 or 15 years, he became that example to me. And I started seeing, like they'd spend the night with us, and the next morning we'd get up, and my dad and stepmother would be drinking coffee. They're reading their Bible study, and their hands are holding, they're praying together. And Roxy and I didn't do that. And I started to see, that he was teaching me instead of us teaching him. It's a process, and you've got to work through it. But when you do things like my dad did in the early years of his Christian life, you run people off. You're not drawing them closer to him. But do we have a compassion for lost people? You can depend on God. It matters not where you're bound. How many times have we heard people say, as soon as I get my life together, I'm going to come to church. As soon as I can give up all of this other stuff, I'm going to be a Christian. It don't work that way. It'll never happen. You come to Christ and let Him get rid of all that stuff. Yes, sir. You don't. I'm going to write that down. I will repeat it. I won't give you credit for it. But just want to be, you'll hear that in the message. You don't get, look at there. Brother Mike's writing it down too. We'll both, You got that one already? I'll shout it from the mountaintop. I want the world to know the Lord of love has come to me. I want to pass it on. Have you ever seen that person in the Walmart parking lot, or the guy that's off of Garrett Road that sits there and holds a sign about God, about giving your life? They're shouting it from the mountaintop. Are you kind of put out by that? Or do you say, that's brave? That takes a certain level of courage to do that, because the rejection is going to be there. People are going to put you on Facebook, this and that. But when we're doing what God tells us to do, it really shouldn't matter what the world says. That's not who we're doing it for. How can we love on non-believers, church? Pray for them. Wonderful. Say it again. That's probably the best one. Don't expect them to be where you are. And whatever sin they're in, the reason why they need Christ. We all were born sinners, but yet we choose to, unfortunately, we weigh it and say, you're into some bad stuff, so I'm not going to witness to you. What kind of look down on them, like out to say, and see them as less than a human than you are. And we are all created equal in God's eyes. No matter where we are in our walk, we were all once was lost, but now we're found. So everybody, that is a very key one. What about respecting their boundaries? What if they say, I don't really want to talk about it today. Maybe another day. Okay, another day. And another day will come. And, if wherever they are, meet them where they are and leave that line of communication open. Don't slam that door. Always leave it open that conversation can continue. And it may. Next week, they may see you in the hall, or they may call you, or, just whatever it is, and you keep that line of communication open is very crucial. Now, what about how important is our loving the lost when it comes to sharing the gospel? Okay? Yeah. We got to meet them where they are. We can love them and never share the gospel. But if you really loved them, that'd be the thing you did first. So, we can be, I guess what I'm saying is do you have someone that sits down at your table, that you invite to functions at your house, or you go to their house so you have functions, or y'all sit together, y'all go to lunch together at work, or whatever it is, and beyond a shadow of a doubt that they're lost, and you never bring it up? Do you really love them? I would question and say no. that it is a superficial love. It's an outward love, and you really don't care about the heart. Now, for most of us in here, I would say that most of us here are Christians. Sometimes the complacency thing that Matt was talking about is everybody that we're surrounded with, and I'm guilty of that, everybody that I surround myself with every day is a Christian. So it's not, that I am around people, the people I work with, my family, they're all, and that's just the environment that I'm in. And so that doesn't excuse me and say, well, everybody I know is a Christian, so I don't have to. No. That's everywhere I go. When you go to a restaurant on a Sunday, that the waiters and servers will say that that's the worst day, that the church people are the worst attitude than anybody else. What does that say about us? You've heard it said, and it's an excuse, but we've heard it said for thousands of years, I'm never going to that church with that bunch of hypocrites. Why do they feel that way? It's because they don't see outside what's inside this building. And they need to. But there's been times that they see inside this building what ain't very godly too. So, but we've got to get somebody past that. And we've got to say, you are sitting in a pew next to somebody else who was a sinner bound for hell that got saved by grace. Does not mean they're perfect. Does not mean they're not going to do something, say something that's out of range for a Christian to do. You've got to mature in your faith enough to say it don't matter what the world does. It don't matter what the people in the church does. I am grounded enough in my faith that nothing can snatch me out of it. That's the part we got to grow and get to that particular aspect. So that's the best way that we can love somebody else is indeed passing on our faith to someone else. Is there somebody in your mind that you say, God's telling me I need to pass the love of Christ on to so-and-so? Is that person coming to your mind? Yes, he does. Yes, he does. Got them convinced. Yeah. Somebody else. You have somebody on your mind? Okay. And then, Sunday is 316 Sunday across the state. And, we all know the passage, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever. Calvinists don't like to hear that, but whosoever is whosoever. And that does not excuse us, even if you do believe that, doesn't excuse us from not evangelizing, because he still commands us, as we read in the passage in Matthew. He still says, see, y'all, we don't know the mind of Christ. And until we get to heaven, we're not going to understand. All we're supposed to do is obey. And obeying means sharing our faith with the lost. It also means sharing it with each other. Because nobody here, including Alta, is perfect. None of us have obtained where our satisfaction, and I'm all the Christian that I'm going to ever be. If you ever feel that way, you're in a sad place to think that you have arrived. Until you get to heaven, you haven't arrived. We all have something that we can be working on. All right, Daniel, let's play that video.